What's happening, everybody? My name is Sean Pitcher. This is Roots Podcast. Today on the podcast, we have Markus Hawkins. He is a mental conditioning coach, really great friend of mine. Super excited to have him on to speak about this specific topic. It's something at the last place I was at, I learned a lot from working with those types of individuals in mental conditioning. And I think he's going to bring a lot to the table when it comes to talking about that, how he utilizes it in practice, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's directly on the field. Markus, really appreciate you coming on today.
Man, I'm happy to be here. I appreciate you having me, Sean. It's good to connect, man. It's good to see you.
Absolutely. I know he was excited. We were talking beforehand. He was hyped to be on this. Markus, want to start off, give us the roots behind Markus Hawkins. Who is he?
Yeah, man. I'm born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland Heights, Ohio, to be exact. As I usually like to tell it, it's the home that LeBron left twice. Right? Being born in Ohio, football is really what you do. They put an Ohio State beanie on your head and a football in your crib when you're born. It's kind of what you do. So growing up in Ohio, football was definitely a huge part of my life. I was lucky enough to play all the way through high school and then into college. But an injury kind of led me into the field. Like many people that's in my area of practice, it's usually injury that leads us to where we are.
And it's funny you say that because same thing happened to me. I played 2 years into college, had 3 concussions. I mean, even my head coach was like, you're at a Division III school. Like, honestly, if you were my son, I tell you to just continue on with school and let go of sports, which anyone knows, like, you play sports from at my age, 7 years old, all the way up into college. And I'm sure you're probably pretty similar. It's hard to just stop and like, well, what else do I do beyond this point now? Like, I don't know what to do, but it essentially then leads you into other ventures, which gets you to the point where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, you do something for so long, it starts to become a part of you. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think as athletes, if you're not careful, you start to confuse that with it being who you are. Yeah. Right. And I always try to remind my athletes that, football or basketball, tennis, whatever your sport, football is what you do. It's not who you are. Right. Like your mom didn't go through hell and back to give birth to a football player. She went through hell and back to give birth to a baby boy who just happens to like to play football. That's a huge difference. Huge difference.
Yeah. I mean, and you can also use just in a realistic sense too. It's like, either way, sports are only going to be a part of your life, right? At any given time, an injury can happen. At any given time, like your last stop could be college. Maybe you get to the 1% in 1 or 2 years in the NFL. I mean, again, you're real unicorns to the people that are spending 8 to 15 years, or like a Tom Brady, like, close to 18 to 20 years in the NFL. Like, that's like the 0.0001%. Like, that doesn't really happen. So it's like, realistically, you have this chunk of time that you're going to be in that position to be an athlete. So enjoy as much as what's given to you, because ultimately at some point it's going to be taken away.
And that's how we've got to treat it. We got to treat it like a gift. We take good care of the things that we value, right? But if you truly want to know what a man values, you got to show me what he does every day. Yeah. So much of our success is kind of composed of our day-to-day habits, but I digress. I digress.
Well, and some people just don't know their value. Like I was talking to a couple of podcasts ago. I was talking to somebody, who's a big figure in his field, right? And really super humble, right? Like I'm kind of like that. I know you're kind of like that. Like, his sayings all the time, I'm just a guy. I'm just a guy.
I'm just here.
Just doing my job, just doing what I was brought here to do. But sometimes like we don't always see all the value of the things that we do bring to the table, regardless how many people tell us. And like in his situation, he was basically like, he goes, it took me until I was 55 to 60 years old, someone to sit me down who I respect to be like, you can bring so much value, even though you're not a coach anymore. You can bring so much value to the field that you don't even know yet, and had to like literally like draw it out and put it in front of his face. And that's someone who's like an icon in his area. And he still felt like he just lifted. He just was a strength coach,
again, right? Like we do this every single day. It starts to become a fiber of who we are, right? But I think sometimes our value gets lost in our day-to-day activities sometimes, right? We're not really looking at the fact that we're impacting lives on our worst day, on the day where you felt like you got nothing right, you were late to every single meeting you had, you forgot about, right? On your worst day, you left a kid or you left an athlete with something that might have changed the entire trajectory of his life. It's about finding those little wins in the day. It sounds cliche, like being from Cleveland, right? Nobody where I'm from is meditating. Nobody where I'm from, right? Like they're not talking about those little things. I understand how it can sound cliche, but like I've really found value in finding those little wins in my day.
And sometimes it can get frustrating because, like you said, right, you're like, you don't feel like anybody's listening to you. You don't feel like the athletes are doing anything that you say, right? Or sometimes you might not have an athlete really express that you made a difference until after the fact, right? It could be 2-3 years down the road and you get this random text and all of a sudden you're like, I haven't heard from this guy from a minute.
Yeah.
And he or she had a moment where it's like, man, what I learned from this individual like has really helped me out in comparison to me looking around to all my teammates that aren't there. And I am there because of the tools I was able to capture during my time with whoever that discipline was or whoever the individual was. And then it just dawns on, and then they message you and they're like, hey, I just want to thank you. Like, this helped me big time. I know I haven't messaged you in a long time and it took me a hot minute to tell you that, but I just want to let you know, like, it's helped me stand apart in that specific area.
That's why we do this, right, Sean? Like that's why we do this. I remember, sharing experiences with you and just seeing the care and the level of detail that you will put into your work, right? And it's not necessarily for, the huge thunderous applause or, in hopes of getting a statue outside of your facility. It's not really, it's never really been about that, for people like me and you. I think, it's always important to remember the same day that we plant the seed isn't the same day we eat the fruit, right? How many times have you heard me say it? It takes time, right? And so sometimes for us, it's just about planting that seed, right? And letting those roots, no pun intended, right? But letting those roots kind of establish themselves. It takes time.
Because all the big fancy stuff is just, I mean, it's just for me anyways. Everyone's gonna be different. It's just materialistic in my eyes. Like, it's temporary. Like, you could have the biggest, fanciest weight room. Like, you could have the biggest, fanciest presentation, right? Like, but none of that really matters. If I don't make any impact with the individual and they don't get anything from it, then I could have as many tools available and fancy machines and technology, but it literally is not gonna matter.
Empty. It's empty, right? Like, we're in the service industry. We work for people.
Mm-hmm.
We remind our athletes all this, like, hey, I work for you. So put me to work. I work for you, right? We're in the service industry. So for us, if we're not meeting those needs, if we're not impacting, what are we really doing?
Or we always say, like, work me out of a job. Like,
there it is.
I mean, I even tell my athletes to this day that where I'm at currently, I'm like, use me as much as you can now. Like, whether it's for a year, whether it's for 2 years, if we get to the point where you're here for 3 years, whatever, how many years it is, use me as much as you can now. Because when you get out of here, right, depending on where you go, if it's college, if it's the pro setting, there's even college and pro settings that don't have individuals like us in that setting, or may not care as much or want to pour into you as much as we do. So it's like, or go out and go ahead and spend $150 an hour for a one-on-one session.
Right.
So I even try, because a lot of athletes, like, it's about money. So it's like, think about how many times you meet me in a day, or how many times you met with me one-on-one. And if I'm going to charge $150, and let's multiply that out over a year or a couple of years, that's thousands of dollars that you're not having to spend because you're investing the time now to learn it. So hopefully you have the skills to be self-sufficient when those obstacles pop up, to do it yourself. Hopefully.
Proactive. We got to be proactive, right? And, I joke with some of my athletes. I'm like, you could pay me now or you could pay me double later. Either way, you're going to have to, you need what you need, right? And, I say that jokingly, but, it's you got to be proactive. These tools that, I have, and the techniques that I have, and, the information that you have, it's not something that you can passively use, right? Like, you can't take the information that we give you and set it on the shelf and then take it and dust it off when it's ready to, when it's game time. Like, it doesn't work like that. You know, mental skills are just like any other skill. If you don't rep this, if you don't practice this, if you're not proactive in seeking this, it's not coming to find you. No one's going door to door handing out opportunities.
There's no inch to switch. With our society now, I mean, everyone thinks like things can come instantly because that's how a lot of things are presented to them. But and when you get back to the basics, like the basics are what work. They're not fun. They're not sexy. They're not something that's going to be quick and easy. But if you invest the time into them, you're going to get what's intended out of them.
Well, I mean, I think it's kind of what you just said. It's an investment, right? Like, it's an investment. It's not always fun. It's not always sexy, but I mean, you'd rather have it and not need it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, when something goes wrong in your house, something breaks, let's say your sink starts to leak, right? If you're a handyman, you're not really sweating about things going wrong and breaking in your house. Why? Because you're confident that somewhere in that toolbox, I have something that'll fix this job, right? It's the same thing. It's equipping yourself with mental tools to help you navigate the things that are going to go wrong in life. Got to be proactive about it.
Yeah, and many times our side is just reactive. It's just something happens, we're freaking out, and then we got to deal with it, and now we're more stressed. And it's like, use those tools that you have. You know what to do in this. Well, I had my brother on the podcast as well, and like he's a social worker, so he kind of talked about like motivational interviewing. And even though he's in a clinical setting, right, he tried to look up a lot of research articles, really try to tie it in with athletes because he felt like he could really throw some really good nuggets out there, even though he's not in that field. But kind of how he coined it as, he goes, everyone really knows that they're supposed to do something, or everyone really knows that how to do it, or they have to do it, or they at least have a base information of what they're supposed to do. But a lot of times it just takes the practitioner to give them the push to get them to that moment to actually do it. And that tends to be the concern a lot of times. Like, it's not that they don't know or they don't want, or they don't have the knowledge to do it. It's just they need to be pushed to do it, to see the difference, to then hopefully become a long lasting habit because it was important to them.
I mean, you know, I'd say the only thing more important than knowing what to do is knowing how to do it, right? And the only thing more important than knowing how to do something is knowing when to do it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, timing is everything, but also if you don't have that prior knowledge base to understand when to apply this information, when to apply this knowledge, right? We all hear this saying, knowledge is power. You and I, we both know that's not true, right? Like, we work around people, we're around people, we've rubbed elbows with people who know a ton, right? Like, they know a ton, they know a shit ton, but at the end of the day, if they're not applying this knowledge that they actually have, what good is it, right? It's just one more book sitting on your bookshelf. It looks great for the Zoom call. It looks great for the interview, right? But like, you probably couldn't tell me one thing that was in the chapter of those books. What good does it do you?
And especially with, you know, any of these age groups, whether it's high school, I mean, it doesn't really matter the age group, honestly, or the level, right? Like, they don't care about your credentials. They don't care about how many degrees you have. They don't care about you've been to this pro level. Like, if you can't help them in some way and explain it in an easy way, and then them having some kind of, and again, I talked about like a fast pace or an instant result, but a lot of times you got to have those quick, small little wins from the start, because that's what gets them to buy into the long-term things you want to do with them, right? Like, it's like me, right? Like, if I have guys going to bed 12 to 4 o'clock in the morning, and then I get them to start going to bed between 11 to 12 o'clock in the morning, and then now they're like, oh, I can wake up and I'm full of energy, or like, oh, I can wake up and like I feel good at practice and don't feel like I'm tired the first 30 minutes. That then helps us, because it's like, all right, well, now I'm going to come ask some more questions, because I didn't really listen to a lot of other stuff he had to say, but I just did this one thing and this made a difference. So he might have something else he could possibly help me with that I've been probably dealing with up to this point that I don't know how to deal with.
I mean, I think it just opens the door to potential, right? Like, naturally, we're hesitant people, right? We're doubtful people, and so, you know, having that little win, right, it opens the door to so many different opportunities. Just, I mean, even from a connection standpoint, that trust, that psychological safety, right? Like, we very much live in a show me society, right? Oh, that works, prove it. Oh, okay, that'll clean my shoe. Clean my shoe. I want to see it. Prove it.
Yep.
Right. And so for us, unless we're adding something of value right off the bat, it becomes a little more difficult to create that buy-in. But one thing that I've really come to see as a practitioner is just being around. Right? Like being around actually helps to build that connection, and just showing face, talking to the guys about something other than mental, something other than mental skills. What are you listening to these days? What's in your ear? Right? Like what's hot right now? You got a better idea than me. I'm washed. I'm washed. Right? It's building that connection.
And even it's just simple as saying, "Hey, how you doing?" That's, and a lot of times, right? Like that's, and I'm sure you could speak on this. One of the big challenges is being that everyone's so reactive, right? Then coaches become reactive, or other staff become reactive. And then it's like, why isn't this person doing this? Or why isn't this person changing that? Or you look at football, right? Like, why isn't this offensive lineman, defensive lineman losing weight? Like, I thought you were working with them. And it's like, it don't work or happen that fast. Right. Like if you didn't have all the past relationships you did, would you have gotten a job at this place or up until this point? Probably not, unless you had those connections that probably develop and happened over years. If I have a guy coming in a week, I don't even know him. I have no clue who he is, where he's from, what his environment is like, if he feels comfortable talking with me, or the only person he feels comfortable talking to is his mom.
Right. Right.
So how you expect me to come in 1 or 2 weeks and turn his world around and make him like a fueling efficient machine, or make him have the best thought process where he's proactive, has a growth mindset? Like, you can't do that overnight. Like, it don't work like that. But some people just want it to happen. Like, it takes time. And I tell every athlete, or I'm even just, blunt with some people, like, you need to give me time.
Yeah.
Like 3 to 4 months. Give me 3 to 4 months to start something, because it ain't gonna happen now.
I mean, it took 18 years to turn 18, right? So just because you want it to happen in 15 years doesn't mean it's gonna happen in 15. It takes 18 years to be 18, right? So like how you didn't develop these unhealthy eating habits, with one burger, you're not gonna all of a sudden make that full shift with one salad, right? And it's the same thing with mental skills. Like it's you've had this pattern of thinking your entire life. I tell them from the beginning, I don't work magic. My beard is dope, but I do not work magic.
So they ask you for recommendations to get cuts. That's how you're telling me you got the guy.
I got this, I got that for you. Mental skills, I got the barber, whatever you need, right? But it takes. I want to set that expectation up front, because most people walking into a session with me, they have no idea what they're walking into. Right? Like, they think they're going to come lay on my couch. I'm going to be doing sketches and asking about their childhood and about their history with their mom. That's not what I do. I'm a performance expert, right? Like, my job is to work with your performance. Now, I do understand that, obviously personal background things, you can't leave off-field issues off the field, right? That's why I have a job. But I think just kind of setting a clear picture of what it is that I do and what it looks like, I think it curbs a lot of that disappointment of an instant fix.
Yes. So let's dive into that a little bit more. What is a quote unquote mental conditioning coach? I mean, there's a lot of kind of titles out there: mental wellness, mental coach, sports psychologist, psychology. So if you can kind of just narrow that down, and also, has that been a huge growth, would you say, in the sports realm too?
Yeah, man, it's so let's start from the beginning, right? As a mental coach, I have my master's degree in sports psychology, or the performance psychology field. My degree actually reads the psychology of movement. What separates myself from an actual sports psychologist is just a PhD. Him and I, we're speaking about the same things. We're having the same dialogue. With a PhD, you become a sports psychologist, you're actually able to get clinical. You actually go a little bit deeper into the things that might be affecting your performance. Whereas me with the master's degree, I'm more so looking at performance tools and performance enhancement. But it's been a tremendous uptick in just service, right? Just the amount of traffic and the amount of information that's starting to flow around the topic of mental conditioning and mental coaching. I think people are finally starting to realize you can't leave that off the field, right? Like, it's going to affect every facet of your life. And now I think they're starting to realize that, you know, maybe going to a traditional counselor or a traditional therapist isn't quite the answer, right? Like they might have what you need from a clinical standpoint, but how can you relate to me playing in front of 85,000 people, right? And I have 25 to 30 coaches calling me in a week, and I just had 5 at-home visits in the same day, right? Like you need someone who's been on the other side of it and can kind of guide you through it. How can you lead someone somewhere you've never been?
Yeah, your typical therapist or psychologist, like you said, a lot. Again, it's just how it looks and how it's portrayed, but you're coming in, you're talking to them, you're in office.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like we talked about at the very beginning, like with more of the performance end or the sports end, like in your area, like you got to go out and see what's going out at a practice. You have to go see what's going out in the moment, like out in the field.
Yeah.
So then for you guys, right, then you're able to see directly, like, all right, I see how he's interacting when he's with the team. I see how he's interacting in individual drills. I see how he's interacting when a game's coming up and something's either going good or not going good. And then you have more of a plan of action on how to, you know, approach them about that situation, whether that's when that event's over, or I'm sure you're going to speak on this more, like in having them figure out in the moment at that time, their thoughts and how they're reacting to it, how it's negatively affecting their player performance versus let's do something for 2 seconds, breathe, refocus, because you got to go back out on the field in the next, who knows, minute, couple minutes, depending on the drive or what the situation is. Like you got to be able to change that around, or now that's going to negatively affect your play, which then makes you look bad on film and makes you look bad, especially you're on TV, but then also hurts your offense or defense, depending on what side of the ball you're on.
I think that's exactly right. Like for me, you know, and you knew this from our time together, like I hated sitting in my office. All right. Like I hated holding sessions in my office. I didn't like doing one-on-ones in my office. For me, I like being out. I like walking talks, right? Like I like being out amongst the people, right? Like let me see you in your field of play. So for me, most of my sessions, depending on your sport, it's held in your area of competition. If you're a basketball player, let's do a session on the basketball courts. If you're a track athlete, let's walk the track while we talk, right? Like, let me put you where you perform best and where you're most comfortable, right? From there, the conversation just flows. But, you know, when you're in that heat of battle and it's halftime or we're in between quarters or whatever the case might be, and you have that time to touch in with me, at that time, it's not my time to be introducing anything new to you, right? Like at this point, we're already here where the table is set, the food is on the table. Right. And so for me, it's a little late to be introducing tools, but that goes back to the part we were talking about earlier with being proactive, right? Like coming to me before you need it. You cannot come to me at halftime and say, hey, coach, I need a mental skill for this, this, and this. I mean, I can give you the best opportunity I can give you the best tool that I can give you. But the reality is what I'm going to give you in this next 1 minute and 35 seconds.
May or may not do anything. It's like, what you're probably going to already know and what tools you already have is what the result's going to be, because I don't have enough time to implement that into you. I mean, it's like, it's funny you mentioned like halftime. It's like the same thing. Guys would come in at halftime. Oh, what should I eat? What's the best thing on the table? What's the best thing on the table to eat? I'm like, well, everything I have on the table is what I would like you to grab or eat, which is why I put it on the table, right? Like it's an electrolyte beverage or a salty snack or a carb, like all things that you need at halftime to be ready for the second half. But you got to figure out which of these array of options that I provide you, what works best for you so that you feel the best going into the second half. Like I can't tell you Cheez-Its are the best versus gummy bears are the best. Like I can't tell you that. Like, do you get energy? Can you play the whole second half? And then do you have any digestive issues? No, you're good. Boom, we're good. Then choose that. And if that works, we'll keep having that available. You can keep using that. And as long as you keep balling out in the second part of the game, then we're good.
I mean, I think back to my time as an athlete, right? I think back to my playing days. And, you know, it's like I never really thought about the fact that I needed potassium until I had that Charlie horse in my quad, right? Like that's when all of a sudden you start like, oh, I'm not drinking enough water. Oh, I need a banana. I need potassium, right? It's again, keep going back to it, but it's the proactive part. You can't wait until you're cramping up to all of a sudden want to start chugging water. It's late now. Right?
Yeah, if you're too late, you're too late. whatever is going to happen is going to happen. And then it just becomes damage control, and damage control is going to go one of two ways. either you're going to recover and be able to, carry out what you need to do, or it's not going to end well, or you're not going to be able to get back on the field.
I mean, a lot of times in games, right? Like I do have tools and techniques to kind of snap you out of that moment, right? Like I think it all depends on what they're coming to see me for in the middle of the competition, right? If it's you finding a counterproductive thought and you can't pull yourself out of it, I have a technique I can give you right there in that moment, right? Like if you're finding yourself ruminating, man, I can't believe I threw that interception. I can't believe I just airballed that shot, right? Like I have a technique that I can give you right there in that moment, right? But like to put it in context, it would be like you going into a move or going into a game trying a move you've never used before.
Yep.
Right? Like I'm giving you a skill that you've never used before, and you're expecting it to work right now. Right now, live in this moment. I just heard this for the first time ever in my life, a minute and 30 seconds ago. I need to apply it right now. Some athletes can do that, right? But most athletes, not so much. You should have saw me.
It's the very, very few. And unfortunate in those cases, right? It's like if they do have that one success with that one random thing, now either they always want to do it.
Yeah. Right.
And you're like, I think I need some more time with that one. Like, I don't know if we could replicate that like every single time.
And I mean, again, man, it's the beard. I swear to you, it's the beard. They expect the magic. It does not work like that. And, for me, I don't want to put you in a position to feel as though I'm letting you down, right? Like it's not fair to me, or it's not really fair to you, right? Because now here you are coming to me in these moments, and it's like, hey, coach, I'm really struggling. Fix it. And it's like, I have the skills for you. I have the tools for you, but like, are you going to be confident enough in what I'm giving you to use it and apply it comfortably?
And it's a give or take, right? You can't be a talker. Like you gotta work with me. Like if I'm going to invest time and going to give you some of these tools, like you got to like try one of the tools.
Yeah.
Right. Like, or if you're in that stressful state, like before you start panicking and becoming reactive, did you try the one tool that we've talked about multiple times, or are you still going back to that same loop over and over because that's what's just the easiest thing to do?
You've got to rep it.
And then it's like, boom, right there. It's like, well, there's your first problem. You're coming for help. I'm giving you tools, but in those situations or obstacles, you're not having the confidence to then use the tool, but then you're wanting me to fix you in the moment, which is not going to happen. Like if you came to me and said, hey, I tried breathing. Hey, I tried this, try to, think a different way during that event when it happened to try to make something positive out of it. Okay, great. That's awesome. Like, and you're still struggling. I got a couple other things in the bag I can bring out. But if you're doing nothing and you're just coming to me every time in that moment to try to fix you every single time, like that's just not going to be a good result or to be able to help you at the best we could.
I mean, from, a neurological standpoint, right? Like when you're in fight or flight, you're going to revert back to what you know,
mm-hmm.
right? You got two options. You're either going to fight or you're going to flight, right? But when you're in fight or flight, your amygdala is being hijacked. The part of your brain that's making decisions and it's allowing you to process, it's not working, right? So when you're in fight or flight, you're going to revert back to what you naturally do. And so I think, that's why it's even more important to make sure that we're supplying ourselves with the day-to-day habits, right? So that it can become natural, so that when you do start to panic and when you're starting to flail, what you're falling back on are actually good, productive habits for your performance and not what you are accustomed to.
Because you got some of those individuals, it's like you said, 18 years of the same thing versus I just worked with you 16 months, or let's say 6 months on this. What do you think's gonna take over? Probably the thing you've been doing for 18 years. So it's like, that's why, again, anything like you said is reps, repetitiveness, keeping on top of it, doing it over, catching yourself in the moment.
And sticking to it once you see results.
Yes.
Right? Like not abandoning what's worked for you this entire time. Once you start, I'm better now. I don't need deliberate breaths. I'm better now. I don't need to pre-plan my thoughts.
It's like, it's like medical, right? It's like someone tells you to take an antibiotic all the way through, you don't, and then the infection comes back. Right?
You're shocked.
Yeah. Or someone tells you like, hey, you should be going to rehab every day because you've had this injury. Oh, you're going to have to continue to do rehab regardless. So hopefully it does not come back. And then they just stop and the injury comes back. So many parallels.
Countless examples, right? Like even I think about my brother and his retainer, right? Like all of that money. It is just, I don't know what it is. It's human nature, man. It's human nature. You know, we think we know best, when in reality, if we knew best, you wouldn't be sitting in guys like me in your offices.
Yep, exactly. I mean, at the end of the day, we're always going to have a job because these things are always going to be pertinent. I think one of the things you kind of hit on earlier is, you know, if you look at mental conditioning or sports psychology, it's becoming big in any field. And a lot of the athletes are making it known, especially the pro athletes. You know, they're expressing that they're seeing individuals to help them, or they're expressing that teams are investing in that component to have it on and available because they're seeing a direct effect in how it interacts with the athlete dealing with what they have to deal with. And again, whether it's college or pros, like you said a couple of times, they have so many stressors they have to deal with. You got the media, you got content, you got have to perform really well. You're trying to take care of your body so you don't get injured, or you're trying to manage an injury to still play through stuff. There's so many different things coming at you all at once that at those levels, like it's such a high challenge. Like if you're not trying to work on some type of mental skill to make sure you're in the right mindset from day to day with everything that's coming at you, like I don't really know how you're going to function.
Well, you know, and often, man, it's I'm always amazed at the human mind and the human body and what we're truly capable of, right? In the conditions that we wake up and function in pretty much every single day, right? Like we came out of a pandemic, you know, and here we are functioning and you know, doing our best to function, right? Some of us, but you know, the reality of the situation is if you do not empty your bucket every now and then, it's going to overflow. Right? Like it's going to overflow. You have to find healthy, productive ways to deal with those drops in the bucket. And when I say drops in the bucket, those little everyday, day-to-day life stressors, right? Whether it's sitting in traffic, whether it's you know, deadlines, whether it's being recruited, whether it's your significant other, your family, your friends, your health, your future, your past, whatever it is, all of these little drops in the bucket, little things add up to be big things, right? And so if you're not really taking the time to decompress and acknowledge what's going on within you, what's going on around you, you can only really give so much. You can only give so much. And every single day we wake up and we're trying to demand the most from ourselves. We're squeezing every little bit of talent and potential we have out of ourselves. And we just got to remember to treat ourselves with that same grace and that same kindness, right? Like it's important.
If not, you're gonna implode,
Which is
the worst case. Which is the worst case that we want, because that's a whole nother rabbit hole to go to.
I mean, you know, I tell my athletes, it's a lot easier for me to take you from here to here than it is for me to take you from down here all the way back up here, right? Like it's about getting you to that baseline. Once we're at that baseline, then it's just about building, right? But it's about coming to see me again before you've hit that rock bottom, before you feel yourself slipping away. Like in life, things are going to happen. Things are going to go wrong, right? Like whether you make it to the league, whether you make it to the Olympics, right? Whatever your dreams or goals are in life, it's not like you leave stress behind. It's not like you leave those little things behind. They're going to follow you. They're just going to look a little different on the level that you're on, right? So you're eventually going to need these skills. You're going to need to cope, because as you continue to progress through your life and you find more success, well, now the stakes are higher, right? Like that fall is a lot farther. That's a lot farther now, right? So it's about just making sure that you're really confident in whatever it is that you have in your toolbox. I don't care how many tools you have, just have something to take care of yourself.
Yeah, and I'm going back to that word, you know, stress. I tell the athletes all the time, right? Like you're never gonna escape it. It's there as soon as you wake up in the morning to some extent, whether it's I got to get up. Oh man, I have an hour, I got to feed myself, and then I got to go to practice. Or, oh, I got to go to school and I got to do this. Like it may not be an extreme stress. It's like something that's ruining your day. But in some cases, it could ruin some people's day because they don't know how to handle those moments, whether they're not scared. Like, I mean, some of the biggest things that I look at is don't have a good schedule, don't have a good routine, And it's like, until you have a schedule and routine down, and this I heard from a talk with the Miami Dolphins dietitian. He did a talk to a lot of sports dietitians, but like that was his number one thing. He goes, if you can figure those two things out, he goes, and they can have those two things in place, a lot of other stuff is going to fall into place and what they need to do, because now they can either in their mind visually see their schedule, whether it's in front of them on a computer, whether it's on their phone, however they do it. If they can know what their baseline schedule is, all the other stuff that can fit in, and now they can be proactive and start planning and doing stuff ahead of time, because they know where those pockets of time are when it has to be done and there's no excuse not to do it, or whether they have this time over here, so I'll spend 10 minutes breathing, or I'll spend some time doing yoga, or I got to get to bed because I got to wake up at 5 a.m. So I got to be to bed by like 9, 10 o'clock, because if not, I'm not going to get enough sleep. Like you could figure that whole infrastructure out, you'll be in a lot better position to function on a day-to-day basis.
I think you hit it right on the head. Like it's our perception of time, and it's time management, right? Like whether you think you have more time than you actually have, or you feel as though you don't have enough time to actually do what it is you need to do. I think most times, I think one of the funniest things that my athletes say to me is, when I'm recommending diaphragmatic breathing, right? And when I'm recommending meditation, and, I'm talking to them about mindfulness, they're like, coach, I ain't got time for that. I'm like, you don't have time to breathe? You're going to breathe anyway, right? You're going to breathe anyway. So you might as well just make sure that you're being intentional about breathing correctly. If you're going to breathe, you might as well breathe correctly. Right. But I think it's just it's our concept, and it's our perception of what it means to take care of yourself. We look at it as a focused, separate, committed effort. Right. And instead of looking at it as something that we can weave within the fabrics of our day-to-day lives. You're going to breathe correctly. Right. You're going to wake up and you're going to do your day. Why not just be intentional about the things you're doing first and second and third? That's all the routine is. Just being intentional.
Yeah. Or I mean, you can you have time to talk about being great. You have time to post all these videos of your good moments, but why aren't you taking time to do the little things to make you the highest level you can be, to be a pro, to be a legend, to be an icon? Like, right? Like these are all these things you talk about and hear about, and what we hear for those people who are on those pedestals, but you don't got time for it. So then I guess you don't have time to continue to talk about being in the position that you want to. And it's like, it's catching them in those moments too, where like, we've both been there. You catch them in those moments and they're like, oh, okay, that's real.
right. And I mean, but I think that's really our job. It's never really telling them, or at least for myself, right? Like for me, it's never really about telling them what to do. It's more of laying the options on the table and allowing them to choose the best option for themselves. Right? Like my grandmother, she always used to tell me, it's funny how there's never enough time to do it right the first time, but there's always enough time to go back and do it again. Right? Like when you're in the moment, I don't have time, I'll pick it up later. But then you have to go back and actually pick it up later. And if you don't, it's not going to be until you trip over it that you finally go and you pick it up, right? Like, why wait to take care of yourself? You might not get it later.
And it's so funny you say that, because I've done it plenty of times, right? Like, if you just take the time in that moment, it takes you 30 seconds to like, or I heard it from a strength coach. His name was Mike Boyle. He said, if something takes you less than 60 seconds to do, you're better off just doing it in that moment, right there and then, so it gets done. And now you're not having to worry about it later, or now you're not thinking about it while you're driving in the car because you didn't do it.
I like that. I love that. I love that. I absolutely love that. I might adopt that.
So Marcus, we're at the tail end here. I definitely think we need to do a part 2. I think there's a lot more that we need to discuss, and there's no way we're gonna be able to get the rest of it in unless we do that. So I'm gonna say this is part 1. We're gonna do this is part 1. We're ending part 1 here before the Zoom call cuts off. I'm not gonna give everyone his bio and his show notes and all that stuff yet, because you're gonna have to wait, because we're gonna do part 2 coming up to be able to explain and go over the rest of stuff we need to. But Marcus,
let's run it back, Sean. Let's run it back.
Appreciate having you on, my guy.
It's a pleasure as always, man. Thank you for having me. Genuinely.
All right. I'll talk to you later. Bye.